So I tested leveling up on a brand new account for Warzone. This is kind of an old account that I kind of had to test stuff with on console. So this is completely done on PlayStation. Go ahead and check on my Twitch. It has the whole little VOD there if you want to go ahead and walk through and see everything unfold. But I'll kind of give you the abridged version. We go in through, we put a timer on. I started with the account, went through, and I basically do a bunch of different things. And that's the gameplay you're going to see. It's kind of just skipping through the different things I was doing while I talk about what it's like. I wanted to see kind of certain things that I kind of had an idea of how things worked when it came to leveling, maybe the new player experience, because I do hear a lot of things, but I've had kind of a maxed out account forever. Like new multiplayer drops, I max level everything, I get my camos, and then I'm pretty much set up. And then everything that new comes out, I simply just unlock it and go from there. And it's always like a little bit here, a little bit there, because we're really only getting new content at the beginning of the season, maybe in an event that's randomly on a week, and then the mid-season event. So it's kind of scattered. It's not like we have to level up new stuff all the time. That's not really the case. Since the meta also hardly ever changes, we also don't have to go out of our way to min-max and level a ton of different weapons, even though I think a lot of people think that. Realistically, you could have leveled up the Kilo and the C9 from the beginning when Verdansk dropped. Those would be your only two weapons. Would be kind of boring to only use two weapons, but realistically, you could have used those from about 50 days ago when it came out at the beginning of April. Regardless of that, what I want to do is test how long it would take me to get to a serviceable position. This is one where I feel like pretty confident in my ability to kind of challenge people, even if it's not 100% the meta, and then also what it would take for me to get to 100% the meta, which in this case was the Krig and the C9, 3 perks, overkill, that type of thing as we ran through. Do I need the specific optic? The one that starts with the V is kind of the meta optic for long range. So that's what I decided to go with. So the things that need to be unlocked for a new account are to be able to create a class at level 3. The AK-74, which isn't a meta weapon right now. It's usable, but realistically, I just need to get it to level 5 for the meta optic, which is the one that starts with the V. That one, you get unlocked at level 10. Not a big deal. Boom, we get on 10 as we're progressing through. Get access to wild cards at level 15, Ghost at 17, Bird's Eye at 23, and then Overkill at 24. And then one of the most important parts, probably one of the worst parts of the leveling process, which we'll talk a little bit more about, is the armory. And that's unlocked at level 25, which is where there's like 30 items in there. You select them, 250,000 XP to actually unlock that item. Krig C, since it's part of season 2, this is part of that content you would have needed to unlock this. Same with the SOG if you like the SOG. 26 is Scavenger, and then Tracker at 29. So basically at 29 we'd have everything unlocked for our operator that we needed to progress. Then when it came to weapon leveling, the C9 meta build is achievable at level 23. Obviously, if you wanted to go a little bit higher, that gives you a 40 round mag. If you wanted to go for the even larger one, which isn't generally the meta, you can just level the gun as you use it. AK-74, like I already touched on, had to get to level 5 so I can get that optic. And then the Krig C to level 32. Realistically, you could get it up to like 23, I think, or 24, and then that'll give you the 45 round mag. But the absolute meta is to have the 70 round mag. So that's kind of what I mean. You could get it way serviceable earlier. It's way usable. Probably even perfectly fine in trios since the reload's a little bit faster, but the 70 we know is the meta for the Krig. Then armory unlocks. You got to get Krig C, which is 250,000 XP, and that's after getting the account to level 25. So these are the obstacles that a new player has to overcome. On top of that, you have to figure out what is the meta, which quick Google search, or you can go on YouTube and just type in JGod long range or top 10 loadouts, and you're going to find the meta pretty quickly. There's a million content creators on every platform, and they pretty much, most of them kind of have the same loadouts and what we consider the top loadouts. Unless they're shilling bundles, then maybe it's a little different. How to level up faster. That's another quick search. How to level up the fastest. I already kind of had an idea what this was. We'll get a little bit more into some of the testing I did as we streamed it. But like I said, the full stream is available if you want to go ahead and look through, skim through, see what the chat was asking, see what they were saying, and see some of the things we did. But one of the things that I do want to preface is that I did this as a free-to-play player, meaning that I could not play multiplayer, which some people say they play Stakeout. They're still going to even comment on this video. That's not an option. That was off the table as a free-to-play player. zombies directed or zombies in general. Obviously, that's not free to play, so I couldn't do that. Even though my own preference, I'll just jump into zombies, takes 90 minutes, and I can max level a gun. 45 minutes, it's serviceable. So it's super easy. This is still easy, and it can be even faster in a party. I just point that out because people do have a couple different options, just those will not be free to play. But before I get too deep into like the results of kind of what I figured out and kind of some of my thoughts, I want to point out that I understand that it isn't necessarily fun to level weapons. Realistically, not for everyone. It's not a thing. They could jump on PUBG, Apex, Fortnite, and they don't have to level anything. And sometimes that is a barrier to entry. For some, it's too high. For some, it's not. And for a lot of people that do play COD, that is something they actually enjoy, leveling. I know it sounds a little bit odd for some people, and people that they do enjoy it. They're like, what the heck are you complaining for, bro? This is like one of the better parts is to level. So there is a little bit of a split on that. Obviously, the vocal people on both sides would be like, quit complaining, or it's terrible, I shouldn't have to level. End of day, the system isn't going to change that much. And they've actually done things that make this leveling system significantly faster than pretty much everything we had since MW 2019. Those systems were terrible, and pretty much every year of COD was way worse on the leveling side. But there are a couple issues that we'll talk about that I think are some of the bigger issues that they could address that would help new players coming back into the game. I did it all solo. I could have easily been in a party, not for the XP gains like that you get from Party Up or whatever the heck that was in the past, but specifically because if I grab a Most Wanted, it's going to get completed faster in a party. If I do a recon, it actually completes faster with more people on it. If I'm doing supply runs, one person could be standing at the buy station while somebody else is grabbing the contract. Your like efficiency of how many contracts per hour per se is going to be 2 to 3 times more in a full party of 4 in Plunder than it would be for me to just do solo. So even though I did it in about 5 hours, even with quote unquote double XP, which really is only like 1.2, it's not double XP, I promise you. It could have been infinitely. It was slow. 5 hours is super slow. For a solo player. If you're even with 1 or 2 people, it's going to be like easily 1 to 2 hours faster. So keep that in mind. It's not necessarily about the overall time. Plus, I wasted like an hour or something testing some of the things that chat had to say with, oh, try boot camp, try this, try that. And I was like, all right, let's just go back to what we know works, which I think casual is pretty good for doing contracts. The problem is you have to do a couple contracts solo before you actually get your loadout, so it's not as efficient at leveling weapons since you waste probably about 8 to 10 minutes leveling, versus if you were in a full party, you'd get loadout immediately. So casual could be good for that because you do 1 contract, that's enough for a loadout, and then you go ahead and just spam contracts with the lobby of mostly AI. Kills are going to be a little bit on the lower end. You focus mainly on contracts. Like 1 contract is going to be worth approximately 10 plus kills. So it's just way more efficient, time saving in terms of doing contracts. So inevitably what I decided on is I ended up doing Plunder because I could start and spawn in with the weapons. It was a little bit more heated, I guess you could say, sweaty, because I'd have to fight for a specific chopper, so then I can get a little bit more map mobility, and then there's just 100 players on the map versus casual, you're going to end up with like 20-ish on the map, and then after you've killed a couple, then it's really not that many. And they take approximately around the same time. The other part that is different is in casual and regular BR, if you buy stuff from the buy station, you get 10 XP, you get nothing in Plunder. They nerfed that to the ground because people took advantage. And that's what tends to happen. A lot of the systems end up being pretty close to each other because anytime there's something people figure out to quote unquote exploit or get fast XP, they patch that and it kind of normalizes so that a lot of things are pretty consistent, but obviously depends on skill level. Since the test was to get to the point where I had a full meta, I had to level up the Krig, which would have been fine, like I said, in the low 20s. And then I had to get to level 32 where I unlocked the 70 round mag instead of the 45. Great part about this is that with the leveling I did for the meta optic, nearly every new weapon will be serviceable around 25. So meaning that as soon as I got the AK, I got that to level 5, I got the little V optic or whatever, and then now I can equip that on every gun basically I'm going to have for rifles going forward. So any new one, So when I get level 20-ish, I'm going to have the meta optic, and then I'll be able to have the meta build, or at least 5 attachment build. And what's nice about that is it's like that's one-time work done. Just like the same thing with my operator leveling and unlocking my perks, overkill, all that. That's only a one-time deal. And then you don't have to do it again unless you decide to prestige. But if you're the type that's going to prestige, you don't care about this leveling system. You've already prestiged multiple times. Anyone who isn't down to re-level up multiple times probably shouldn't be prestiging, even with prestige tokens. It's just kind of, unfortunately, that's just how it goes. So most of the time when a new gun comes out, if you get access to the gun, it should only take about 45 minutes to an hour to level the weapon, because you've already done the other leveling. So there is carryover. It's not like you have to do this from scratch every single time you want the meta. Do it once, you have the meta. 2 months later, when the season changes, then maybe there's 1 or 2 weapons that you can add into it. It'll probably take you about an hour or 2 to level those up progressively to be serviceable, and then be pretty good. For comparison, I think this leveling system, like I already said, is night and day better than what we had previously. You got to remember, in MW 2019, we had 70 levels. Be it that most people played multiplayer, they had 6 months of playing the game before Warzone ever dropped. Maybe that kind of changed people's perspective. They were in COVID, so they had lockdown. They were playing the game 10 hours a week instead of 4 or 3 or whatever the case is. So some things skewed there. Even Cold War had 55 levels, and most of the best weapons were like level 53 was the attachment. So it was pretty bad, and the scaling in that, it was slower. Like they actually throttled it so that you finished the level 70 and the level 55 around the same time, which is generally like 6 to 7 hours without any kind of XP bonuses. Then we got to Vanguard, which some of those weapons had high levels as well. Plus, again, late level attachment, plus 8 attachment loadouts. So you kind of needed a lot of attachments to make it work. So terrible systems, very slow. You got a lot of attachments out of it, but realistically, it was just like busy work. And it was way worse than, again, we have now. MW2 had this new system that they thought was going to be great. And it kind of was terrible and kind of great. As you explain it, it'll make more sense. You needed to level up multiple guns to get each attachment. So if you wanted a specific optic, a specific magazine, a specific barrel, you had to use different weapons in the weapon class. And once you did that, it unlocked it universally. And then that kind of sucked, because if you only want to use one gun, you should get access to the attachments. That was the problem. But the good part of that is when a new weapon came out, you could level it up like 8 or 9 times. And because you've already leveled up all the other guns, that you would get that automatically. So it would take like no joke, 20 minutes, 25 minutes to level up some of the MW2 weapons when they were brand new, because of that system. So I think it was kind of a double edge. Like the first part really sucked. The time investment in the beginning, horrendous. It would take you multiple hours to unlock all those things that you needed, multiple beyond what is like feasible for a new player. But the new weapon, it was only like I said, 20 minutes. So it was super feasible. Still a bad system though, overall, net negative. And then MW3 kind of had its own issues, and some of that still carried over. If you wanted specific attachments, you still got to use it. It was a pretty bad system, and it was okay. But this one has generally been where you can finish most guns in under 2 hours, I think, for a gun. So it's significantly faster. And that's even without double XP. I think you can do 2 hours. You can get it serviceable with no XP bonuses or anything like that, which is way better than 70 levels, late attachment unlock, and all these other things. So I don't know. It seems like people have been more vocal this year about the XP grind and what that entails, even though every year was way worse, and sometimes 2 to 3 times faster it is now than it was previously. And I think there's a few systems that play into this. I think the Battle Pass is part of that, which we'll talk about, the Armory. And then the thing I mentioned earlier in the video is that people think you have to level up everything. And I hear people say this all the time, but that's not true at all. And we'll go ahead and kind of break down each of these bullet points, right? So Battle Pass, this is a huge problem for a few different reasons. One, it takes about 40 minutes per tier, regardless of your skill. I know a lot of people are like, what's the fastest? What's the fastest? Whatever 40 minutes racks up in the fastest, that is the fastest. And for new weapons that are at tier 21, that's approximately 8 hours. And the other weapon, which is usually around tier 42, That's about 16 hours. That is a huge problem because then it's like, well, we've added a new gun, which it's kind of a flip of the coin, whether that gun will be hard meta or basically useless. We've had both scenarios happen where it comes out, like this FFAR that's coming out in season 4. It could be insanely broken like the AK was at the beginning of season 3 or whatever. But it's not guaranteed, right? It could also come out and be completely garbage. LC10, I don't expect it to be good. It wasn't particularly good before. And it kind of has to fit in with a bunch of other SMGs. So maybe that one's going to be trash. But if the better one's at the higher tier, that means you have to play 16 hours before you even get access to the quote unquote meta gun, which I think is a big problem. That's a huge issue. Even though like you got to play 16 hours to get the gun. And then now that you have the gun, it only takes you about an hour to level. Not that big an issue. So I think that first 16 hours is the bigger issue, but people generally complain about that last hour because that's kind of like, oh, cool, it just takes forever. I've been using the gun, blah, blah, blah. But reality is it took 16 hours to unlock the gun, which is the bigger problem. I think they tried to solve a little bit of this with season 3. We'll see if they continue this with season 4 and actually make really good options for the default loadouts. There was a few that we had that were serviceable for the default loadouts that are completely unlocked at level 1 or whatever. But they need to continue on that. And I think that can help in this area so you don't feel like, oh my God, even though we know this is the case, they want you to buy the battle pass, they want you to buy blueprints, but it is what it is. Now to the armory. This system, when it first came out, not a completely terrible system. It has its pros and cons initially, but they just got super lazy with it and they just made it insanely high XP. So even when I was maxing out XP, I was getting around 60,000 a match. And those were like the good matches. Some of the off matches would be like 35K. Not great. But realistically, it should take you 5 full matches of XP grinding. That means looting all the chests you see, doing all the contracts back to back to back to back to back for around 20 minutes. Realistically, that's about 5 matches. Optimal. And 5 matches, that's over 2 hours. So that seems kind of a long time. And that's doesn't start counting until after you hit level 25, which even that part takes like 2-ish hours. So you level up to 25, takes about 2 hours. Then you get access to armory, and then you got to select the item. If you don't, it's not going to choose the one you want. Then you got to put in 2 hours to unlock it. And then you got to put the hour in, or maybe even 2 if you're a little bit slower, to level it. So now you're talking about obstacle, obstacle, obstacle. Realistically, that first 2 hours you'll never have to do again because the armory will always be unlocked. But all that is a pretty big problem, right? Realistically, the XP should be like closer to 100K. You should unlock the armory at level 1 or even level 3 because that's when you get your creative class. Those could easily solve a lot of those issues. And I think those are bigger issues than the actual weapon leveling, which we know by comparison is infinitely faster than we ever had in MW 2019, Cold War, Vanguard, MW2, and MW3. It's just better. There's still room for improvement. I think it could be a hair faster, but realistically, these other issues are the bigger issues, in my opinion. Like I said before, another issue is people think that you have to level everything because the meta changes, or they really haven't been paying attention and they think like a game still works like MW2, and that's really not the case. And the meta hasn't changed often. Like people swear it changes weekly. I'm like, bro, we had RPK for 100 days. This thing does not change. We had the AMAX and the Krig and the Kilo, all kind of meta for these past 50 days, 2-ish months of the same meta. And that was perfectly fine. It's not like we changed it every week. And if anything, they did a great job of adding more options to the meta over time instead of subtracting them, which I think they did a much better job this season. Unfortunately, a lot of people have this mindset, or at least they put it out there vocally, that they think that there should be 0 leveling in Warzone. Realistically, that's not going to happen. It's part of the core DNA for leveling to be a thing in Call of Duty. And so are loadouts. Tried to do no loadouts in the past when Caldera dropped. Huge problem, caused a lot of issues, and unfortunately the things that are part of the core aren't going to change. Leveling is not going anywhere. Like I said, they can do things that can help. Double XP weekends can help you to level a little bit faster. Keep it in mind that even though it says 2x, it's really like a 1.25, which is only like 20% more instead of 100% more XP. So it's not particularly good. I don't know how that's even legal, but it is everywhere in their marketing. Anytime they promote stuff, tokens somehow give you like a little bit extra. I think it's like closer to 1.4 XP. So it's like 40%. Log in daily, you get an XP token most of the time. I learned a little bit from this. I really found out like the bigger issues are the armory and the battle pass, and less so the leveling process. I don't really find it that big of an issue. If your friend doesn't want to play for an hour to level a gun, Warzone might not be for them, unfortunately. And I know that sounds harsh to say, but it's like it's part of the DNA. It's not going anywhere. They want you to buy blueprints, bundles. Other games can do it. They get away with it. COD's a multi-billion-dollar company, and they're going to keep making multi-billion dollars because people do buy those things. Sadly, they do. Good luck with the leveling. Hopefully we see some of these more casual-friendly changes to the Battle Pass or the Armory, especially for free-to-play players. They don't have the opportunity to jump into multiplayer zombies. Appreciate y'all supporting the channel. Thank you for watching. As always, have a great day.